for District 3 School Board, and I wanted to have him on because these elections are important. Lots of things are happening in the country right now, more importantly locally and all of that. And so Bret has been on the school board for how long now? 2.5 years. And so I wanted to bring him in, get this going, and hear all about him, and give you guys in the public an opportunity to ask any questions you may have. So without further ado, we are going to get going, my friends, and get right into this. So first and foremost, thank you so much for coming. I really do appreciate it. And the point of this interview is really just to kind of learn about you and see what you're bringing to the table, hear your thoughts on things. And so this will be a free flow discussion where I ask him questions. And again, feel free to chime in. If we're able to get to them, we will. But without any more talking, and we're going to get going. So if you would, my friend, tell us a little bit about you. For the ones that have no idea who you are, anything about you, just kind of lead in with your background if you don't mind.
So I moved to Victoria in 1967 with my mom. She was a single teacher at the time. And so I went to school, elementary school, Vickers Elementary. And by the way, Vickers was there that long ago.
So we're not going to ask your age here, right. but Vickers, huh?
And then I went to Howell, and then I graduated from Victoria High in 1982. And so I basically have lived in Victoria all my childhood. Went off to school at Southwest Texas or Texas State. Went on from there to earn my MBA at a place called Thunderbird, which is now part of the Arizona State system.
Okay. And
then from there, for my education purpose, I went on to Singapore and got a law diploma. So,
Singapore?
Yeah.
Okay, well that's interesting. So, I kind of, what was it like? Give me elaborate a little bit about Singapore. I've never been to Singapore, and that sounds pretty interesting.
Well, as you know, a lot of people say they cane and you can't chew gum and all that kind of stuff. So you can't throw the gum on the ground. You can chew, but you have to just do it discreetly. So what I loved about Singapore is that they really know how to engage business and education together. And they don't have any resources like a lot of countries, and so they have to really focus in on the education. Wow. And so I really love Singapore. Didn't love the humidity there. It's all year round. It's on the equator.
And so that, it could be worse than here, huh?
Yeah, so
wow.
I'll give you something that's kind of fun. Is my wife was working for a company, and she was going it's called Agilent, and she was going back to San Francisco for some training. And they asked her, do you have a jacket? She said, no. She said, well, we provide a jacket because in Singapore it doesn't get below 70 degrees. And if you go someplace where below 70 degrees,
they need a
jacket.
That's almost like South Texas, though. I swear if it gets 1 degree below 90 here, you'll see all the young ladies in their jackets and their fall, because they never get an opportunity to wear it. Well, and I heard you say your wife in there, so you are married.
I'm married, got 2 sons at West High School.
Gotcha.
So I've got a junior and a sophomore.
Gotcha. Well, that's interesting. How married? How long?
I've been married 20 years. 20
years and 2 kids.
Yep.
What's your real job outside of the school board?
So I'm a consultant.
Okay.
I have a lot of background in corporate life, overseas, mostly in Asia. I've done some in Europe. So when I started working with those companies, I began to see how they were helping some of the supply companies. And when I was in Singapore, after I got the law diploma, I started working in consulting with a Singapore company, and then we established our consulting practice there. The purpose was try to help Americans to get over and set up shop or set up manufacturing in Asia. And that was the time about 9/11, and so everything changed, shut down, and it was just inter-Asia. So I did more work in China and Korea than I did back from the United States.
Did your family go out there with you, or were you alone?
No, the family was there with me.
Did you have? Were your kids old enough to?
So my son, the youngest was conceived in China, and the other one was born in the United States. But when he was first born, we went back to China.
Wow. Were they old enough at any point to have memories of that, or was it so far back?
No, it's too far back.
Gotcha.
They didn't have any memories. So we've been back obviously a couple of times, and so they've seen things, but not all the places that we live. We haven't taken them to Singapore or China, but South Korea they've been a couple of times.
That's really cool. Yeah. I'll pick your brain later about some of the China stuff. I want to learn some of that. What makes you go from traveling in Asia and doing all that to decide to run for the school board?
Yeah. Well, this is my home. Victoria is my home, and so I wanted to be able to serve. As I explained to you earlier, I haven't had the opportunity to do a military service. Matter of fact, I tried when I lived up in Wisconsin and tried to do some reserve work, but they told me I was too old.
Well, that stinks.
So I mean, I understand it, but at the time I was about 33, and so they were looking for people that are a little bit younger. So I said, okay. So I kept trying to find ways to serve, and so this has been one of my ways.
And I guess you just had time where you were watching the VISD or having your own children go through there.
Yep.
You, more than just talking about it, you wanted to get involved and toss your hat in the ring.
Absolutely. So what helped me get into be involved with it was when I came back to Victoria after being gone for 30 years. I noticed that there was some concerns about the workforce. And I began to understand, so why the workforce? And I talked with people at Caterpillar, and they told me, they said, we just having difficulty time finding some good workers. They don't show up on time, they don't have a lot of etiquette. Sometimes if they've been trained that they could do it again, and here we can't do it again, we got to get it right because we have a team depending upon them. So that made me think, what can I do? And I started asking questions. I got involved in the Chamber of Commerce. I got involved in what was called at the time VBEC, Victoria Business Education Coalition, which is now called CBEC, which is the area. And at that time, I just began to say, okay, what can I do to help? And so to bring education and businesses together. That actually led me to consulting, not international business, a little bit with small business, but mostly within the school districts in the surrounding area, in the rural areas. And what I'd love to do is to take the needs of the businesses and the industries in an area and say, what is it that's in common that we can begin to help develop curriculum that'll begin to train your workers so when they're graduating, your strategic plan can be met. I mean, a lot of workers, they know exactly in 2 years what their needs are, their expansions, etc. And it was successful, and I've been happy doing it and love it. And so that began to make me think, okay, what are we doing in Victoria in career and technical education? What are we doing to help our students get ready to be in the workforce? And that's where it's just led me into being on the board.
Well, that's a good point, because from a young age, a lot of times it's just drilled into your head, college, which I'm not opposed to college, but it's also not for everybody always. You know, there's trade schools, and there's some of these, and you know, in real estate and other industries, I deal with a lot of these contractors and stuff, and you're right, that's the complaint that they have is, you know, I can't get anybody, A, that wants to work and do these things, or B, that's trained to do these things. And you know, I remember back when I was growing up, you know, people would make, oh, you're going to be a plumber. You know, they would talk down about those industries. Well, plumbers are making $99 an hour, and electricians are making $99 an hour, and they have job security. We're in South Texas. It's always hot down here. There's always, and I've always thought that was such ignored, you know, career options and stuff. And so I see your wisdom in that, and I think that's a great thing is you know, and then we can keep them locally, and you know, because I know a lot of people like the day I graduate, I'm gone.
So let me speak to that. So when my research and the market research, I began to talk to the students and really do some survey work and interview them and understand. I remember some students would say, I want to go out soon, just like you said. But quite frankly, if you look at most of the students, particularly in the rural districts, about 63% of them actually stay. Some of them will commute to the larger city like Victoria or to some of the surrounding metropolitan areas. There's those that come and go, they're going to go. They want to get out. They can't wait. But then those that sometimes say, you know what, being in Victoria wasn't that bad, and they'll come back. So that's where I get the 63%. So you have those that never leave. You have those that commute. They live where they're living, but they commute, and then those that come back. And so that's why it's important, so that the industry knows that you have this pool of workers that you really got to get ready for and begin to help. And so, and 2012, that's when it all started.
No, I think that's brilliant. That kind of leads me into what is, for those of us that, you know, don't have kids in school, or maybe we're getting to an age where we're starting to pay attention to these things and all that, what is the role of the school board? I mean, what is your actual, I know it's not just to meet and hang out and watch movies once a week or once a month or whatever. What is the actual role of the school board?
So we are elected by districts, and let me explain where my district is, just so you'll have an understanding. If you can just kind of think of the northwestern side of Victoria, and if you'll go with me on the elementary schools, that'll kind of give you the neighborhoods. So Allo Elementary, up to Mission Valley, over to Charlemont, and then to Vickers. And so that's my district. So if you're living in that district, then please, I'd like to ask you for your vote.
Yes, sir.
But just to give you back the question, the role is really pretty simple. One is to set the tax rate. All right, so that's every year we look at seeing the budget, and we have to also approve, the superintendent and his administration will put forward a budget. We approve that, and by doing that, then we know what the tax base has to be set at. So those two things are important. So approve the budget, set the tax rate, and set policies. We review the policies on operations, all the school procedures, et cetera, that go forward. And then I guess there's one last thing. If we ever had a grievance, then the normal chain of command is to go to the school, to the principal, to the superintendent, and ultimately, if they're not satisfied, it comes before the board.
And so it's not one of these things where, if, say I'm a student, I get mad at my teacher, and I come home and tell my mom, and she calls and chews you out, that you don't go over to the school and go fire the teacher. That's not the way that works, and all of that. It's more of a 30,000 feet type thing.
Yep. And a lot of times there have been people that have done that. They've called me, and I'll say to them very frankly, I just need you to understand, I'm more than willing to listen to you and hear you out, but if you're going to take it potentially to a grievance where I have to sit, I may have to excuse myself because we've already talked about the situation, and so there's no bias there. So.
And there's if they choose to do so, there's avenues that they need to.
Absolutely.
You're kind of the end, not the beginning.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. So on that note, you guys are. About a year and a half ago, I had a talk with a school board trustee, and I was questioning some things, and I mentioned to that person that, you know, you represent us. You're a representative of us. And I was told back that we are not representatives. We are trustees, and we do not have to do what our constituents want. We do what we think is best. I would like to ask you, what is the difference between a trustee and a representative? You know, because I was under the impression that the school board members represent your constituents. We vote for you, and so that was the impression that I had. And when I asked this, it's a genuine question. I'm not asking you to say something different than but I was sincerely perplexed by that, and because that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If you're campaigning and people are voting for you, that would mean that you represent them in my mind. And so, but then, you know, your role here, or your title when you're running, is candidate for trustee. So for in a layman's term, or for somebody dumb like me that doesn't get it, can you explain the difference, and where do you see you individually, and I'm not asking you to speak for anybody else, but for you, how do you see your role? While you wear the name trustee, are you representative of the people, or do you do what you think is best?
I think it's actually a little bit of both, and let me explain to you. So we are making decisions as a board. We never have a decision just based on one person, two people. We always have to make a decision as a board, so that's where the trustee element comes into it. I think as far as the district is concerned, we try to be available as best we can to those constituents, and we do have a responsibility, and I've taken it upon myself to join PTOs, excuse me, to really understand what's going on and to make myself available if they ever wanted to talk to me. But I think the main thing is we do have the representation for the district, but we also have to be acting only as a board, which sometimes can present great challenges because we don't always agree.
And how many school board? I mean, how many members are on the board? 7 total.
7.
Gotcha. Now, this question, you're probably going to have a similar-ish answer. Do you see yourself primarily as a representative of the taxpayer in the community, or do you see yourself as a representative of the school system?
I think I'm elected by the people, so we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we're doing the best we can do with their money, and it's a public money.
Gotcha. And I think, you know, sometimes the perception of the public is we feel like we're fighting against the school board sometimes because, you know, we may not want things, and it seems like they don't always go our way, and that can get kind of confusing there. Last go around, and it wasn't one you were involved in, and this was a previous election, I asked the question to all of the people that were running. I wanted to know what their ideology was, their political ideology, whether Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, and I asked that to the group of everybody running, and everybody refused to answer, and nobody would give me an answer on it. And they all just, well, we're here for the people, and well, that's good, but I wasn't asking because I want to vote a party line ticket. I was asking because I think ideologies are important. And, you know, one side may be more of a tax and spend type, and the other side may be more fiscally conservative. And so I do, while you're not, and I don't even know because I didn't have anybody for the school board, but I don't know do you guys run as a Republican or a Democrat or a party affiliation?
We do not. So as for the city elections, the mayoral election, the city council, there's no political affiliation.
Gotcha.
Same thing with water district and same thing with the school board.
Gotcha.
Which is interesting because for this election, because it's in November, there's a lot more attention going for the political parties.
Yeah.
Normally we are elected in May, and because of COVID, we postponed it based upon the governor's recommendation.
You know, and that's an interesting little tidbit there, because I would just assume that you guys would run under a party, so we kind of knew, and because, you know, I would argue without getting actual statistics, you know, that Victoria's 65% conservative, but that's not always reflected in the different boards and offices, and I think a lot of that may be for those very reasons, is that people don't know people's ideologies, and so they get them up there, and then they find out, oh, wait a minute, like that, you know, and I nothing we can do about that for this debate, but I wonder, or this election, but I just wonder if that's something that people should know, because again, that would affect how I voted, because that's how you believe, and that's kind of important. And I think it's weird that we don't ask people that. And so, on that note, if you choose to answer, where do you line up if you want to go down that road? And I won't hold your feet to the fire, but I'm curious, is kind of, where do you line up on things?
So I'm going to answer a couple of ways. The first way is when we were agreed to go onto the ballot, at the time there was a law that said you cannot do straight ticket. That changed, and now it's changed back. So I felt sorry for the voter people because they were sending things out and setting up the programs, etc. But for me, from my perspective, since we don't have a party affiliation, if somebody were to do straight ticket, they wouldn't have voted for us. And so I like the fact that they're now doing individually, because they will then vote for us. Will it be either myself or my opponent? To answer your question, I consider myself conservative.
Okay.
I have certain Christian values but I just think I'm conservative. I mean, everybody's opinion's different, and,
yes, sir.
And so I won't
no, that's
profess to be one way or the other.
Nope, that's all I needed. Now this next one, this is the one I'm just going to wade right into, because it is somewhat of a controversial subject, and so I'm just going to get it right out there, and we'll go through it. It's on race relations, and right now there are competing ideologies regarding things like social justice, white privilege, critical race theory, and unconscious bias training, between the political parties. There's a lot of talk about diversity, but to me the most important type of diversity is diversity of ideas, and that's what I'm worried that's not being promoted, and the fear is that only the politically correct left-leaning perspectives are being taught. And so I guess my question is, if we're going to go down that road of the schools teaching social justice and doing all that, I'm under the impression that if you choose to go down there and you're going to teach that side of the aisle on things, are you also going to teach conservative ideology and voices on that? And because there couldn't be more night and day, and conservative analysis on poverty, race, policing shows that systemic police brutality just is a false narrative, and I guess my question is, should the schools be teaching this, or should they, should VISDs just stick to teaching math, physics, English, history, etc.? Is it the role of VISD to what I consider church or family things versus, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's something that VISD should be in or not?
So having been an exchange student in Switzerland, having lived in Asia in multiple countries, having a Korean wife, I have to admit that I've experienced racism reversed. And when I was in Korea. Koreans are, in general, they're very homogeneous, and there was a lot of misconceptions that they're definitely much open now than when we were 20 years ago courting one another, so it was a little bit different. So I've had some experiences. I'll also say in 1977 was the first time that the school districts began to, the students that were normally going to schools in the southern part of the city, they began to integrate them into different schools. And so that was a time that I can remember. From one standpoint, as an athlete and playing football, I enjoyed having some of my opponents that were big and stronger than we were, and all of a sudden now they're going to be on our team, so it was a great opportunity. But to answer your question, I think for me personally, I think education has a responsibility to teach critical thinking. In other words, not to make the decision for somebody, but to present both sides for them to be able to make their own decision and teach them how to do that, not just to hear one side or the other, but to really listen and try to dive into things. My father was a great teacher. He taught VISD multiple times. People knew him because no matter what you said, he was going to take the opposite, even if he didn't believe it. And he instilled that in me, to be a great critical thinker and go out and do your homework. And which is one thing I do very proudly. I do that for the board. I make sure I do my homework when the agenda items come up. And sometimes I have questions, and sometimes I will talk to the superintendent, or I'll ask him, explain this a little bit more, or things of that nature. So I really believe in critical thinking is important. That's what we need to be teaching.
And I could not agree with you more on that. Critical thinking is one thing I teach my agents a lot of, and I could not agree more. But how does somebody, like me, ensure that, I know one side is being discussed. How do we know that the other side of the spectrum is? Because I haven't heard any of the alternatives being pushed or being whatever, but I've sure heard a lot of these narratives that I don't agree with, you know, from my point, pushed on there. So how do we as you know, parents
Citizens,
and taxpayers and citizens make sure that this is being, because I could live with if they're going to teach one, teach other. I could live with that. Provide it, let them pick. But if this is not even being presented and this is now being promised and we're going to teach, I have an issue with that.
I would encourage you. I'll be honest, when I got on the board, I had expected a lot more public participation. If there's an issue that really gets people's attention, of course they're going to show up. We experienced that with some of the zonings, rezonings, and some schools that we closed. But other than that, we don't have a lot. And to me, that's the place that you could begin. If you want to voice your concern, you can do so in a public session. We listen. You have to have 3 minutes, and so you can share your viewpoints one way or the other. I think the other thing you can do as a parent, when you move here or when you're getting ready to enroll your children, you can ask questions to the principal when you're looking to see if that's going to be there. Every classroom is different. I hope that all of our teachers are presenting that. I can't say we're probably perfect, but I think that we should be doing that.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And on that, you know, I don't have this as a question, but you hit a good point. Community participation and stuff, you know, and you know, I know from my standpoint, and probably a lot of people, the only time we because I don't have kids in VIST, and we know about you guys when we get our tax bill, and you know, with everything, everybody's busy, everybody has life going on, and a lot of times the thought of going to sit at a school board meeting that I don't have kids at, that, you know, it sounds like a terrible idea, and it's just, and it's kind of the same thing like with the city council. You know, you start questioning things on the city, and it's, well, you need to go to a meeting, and you need, well, I don't want to go to a meeting. Like, I know I need to, but I don't want to. But again, the school's a little bit different, and what have you seen in your time on there? I know one of the things that Superintendent Shepard's done a good job on is some of these, I forget what they called them, the little committees with the people, task force, and trying to make an effort to bring people in. Have you seen, in your short time on there, have you seen an increase in participation, or is it still about the same?
It has increased. What I'm proud of is there's some people who have been pushing Dr. Shepard, and he's responded very positively to getting more people involved, not as much of the school district employees or past employees, but getting more of the community leaders involved, and that I'm very pleased with. Yeah.
Good. So how, you know, I hear a lot, you know, well, VISD is ranked this, or their grading is this, and all of that. I don't pretend to know. But on that note, how are schools held accountable or graded? And the next step in that is, where does VISD lie in that? Are we at the top, the bottom, the middle? Kind of, how are the grades administered, and where do we rank?
So there is testing that the state provides, and that is done once a year. We have preparations in the fall, and then the testing is generally done in the springtime. Those are giving us a rating of how the schools performed, and then overall the district performance. They changed a couple of years ago to the A through F grading scales, and we have made progress, but for me, we've not made enough progress.
Where do you know where we're ranked?
Yeah, we're at I don't know the percentile,
right,
where we were, but the thing that I do agree with, we're in the lower percentile. I'll just answer that. Having said that, the downside, and this is one thing we're trying to change, and that is to get more of a community accountability as far as the grading. It's similar to my philosophy that I explained in the career technical. But one of the things that happens is, so you do the testing, you don't get the scores until months afterwards. Then to be able to put a plan in to make a correction, you've got a period of time that's too far.
Yes, sir.
And particularly now with COVID, there was no testing that was done. And so I'm very concerned that some of our students are going to be left behind, and we don't have a way to be able to measure them. We have some internal measurements that we have just implemented this past spring before COVID, which is a great thing, so that'll give us some perspective, and much more importantly, real time, not waiting for the state to respond.
How do you, I'll get to that one. I'm going to loop back around. Right. I got one coming. What do you see right now as the biggest strength of VISD?
Diversity. When I say that, we're trying to do things more for the career and technical education that we never had. There's P-TECH is basically an integration of a certain industry. IBM came up with the idea that they worked it, and we're now implementing it for education and for healthcare, and we're looking at other things down the road. So the career technical thing is really, really exciting.
I like that one too. I think that's brilliant. I really do. What do you think would be the biggest weakness of VISD?
Slow.
So getting things implemented and this.
Which is really important, and we're having a meeting tomorrow night. I hope we can get to some conclusion, but we're having a vision meeting, and to me, vision, if you can't set that vision that everybody can follow and understand, and then you can set budgets toward that once you get that agreement, and then a lot of things just kind of fall in place. But to me, a vision, and I always use the example of a retirement. What's your vision for retirement? Do you want to stay in Victoria? Do you want to go to the beach? Do you want to go to the mountains? Once you tell me that, now I have an idea, and I can work with you if I was your financial planner on putting together a plan on making sure that your vision is realized.
Makes sense. And the mountains.
That's
where we'll talk after, but the mountains. So looping back around to the, this all kind of ties in together, but, rank-wise, Victoria is low. But tax-wise, we are very high. We have a high tax rate. We have, and like we discussed earlier, I would just argue the vast majority of people don't ever even know what's going on until they open that tax bill and see that, VISD is eating up 60 to 70% of their tax bill. How are taxpayers to square with that? When they see that huge, 70% of their taxes are going to VISD, and then they do see those rankings and they do see that, overpaying, may feel like, how do we square that with the taxpayers of, for lack of better terms, low results and high pay, high cost?
So it is I view the taxes that they're paying as an investment. So to answer those people that do not have children, or if you want your community to grow, you've got to invest in the education. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind about that, because if you're not investing in that education, then you're not going to get the results that you want. So that has to be there. Having said that, I don't want to put the blame on the state, but I will tell you the reality. In the past, the state was about 30%, Victoria property owners were about 30%, and about 60% of the taxes were coming from the state. It's now been flipped. So that's why you're seeing that burden being more realized. And it goes in then next level of that is the appraisals and how that's come forward. And so there is a process, as you know, in the appraisal district, right or wrong, but that's there. And so for me, I'm always trying to look for ways. We have to fund the education, but I'm looking for ways to generate non-tax revenues. And as I mentioned, the CTE, the state pays an additional amount per student for that CTE student that's taking a class. And so for that class, we get additional funding. So those are ways that we can look at generating additional revenues that we don't have to go to. Another way that Dr. Shepard has done very well, and I mentioned this morning, is that he's been really working hard with his team to identify grants, and grants that are out there to develop the different type of traditional, the PTECs and some of the other non-traditional types of education. And so we're pushing $8 million, and that's fabulous.
What are your thoughts on school choice? Because one of the questions that I have from the community is, I send my 3 kids to private school for a quality education because VISD is a failing district. Why must I continue to pay property taxes to VISD? Now, I know that's not a Bret, Baldwin, or a Victoria School Board thing. I realize that, but I did think it was, it gets into the bigger picture to me of I think the answer to some of these questions is school choice and allowing parents to do that.
But you even have a choice within the district. I mean, we have areas, but if there's some issues that you really feel strongly about, then you go through a hearing process. We have people coming in from out of district that go into our schools because they don't want to go to the other schools that they live next to. So there's some choice there as well.
But overall, I guess I'm talking the more overall of allowing, instead of my tax dollars automatically going to VISD, to public education, I get to make the selection on where my tax dollars go and choose where my kid goes, and those dollars follow me.
That's something at the state level. That's unfortunately.
Right. I just didn't know if you had an opinion on it or not. If you, zooming back out to stuff, not checkers, not a tomorrow thing, not a next election thing, but just overall ideology. If you saw value in school choice, or if you think public schools the way.
Well, I'm a big proponent for public schools. That's where I choose for my children to go. My parents were both school teachers. I grew up with my next door neighbors. They went to one of the private high schools, and so I think that they learned a lot of things. But I also think that we had some great teachers, and I know my kids are doing very well in school, and I'm proud that they're doing so well. And the thing that I feel like that we would be more competitive with some of the other private schools if we started doing more of what I call GT gifted and talented work for the children and identifying. We've already made some progresses there, but I still feel like we need to do a lot more. My son excelled 2 levels in math because he was identified early and began, and the school district was so accommodating to make sure. And so he's, as a sophomore, he's doing junior and senior math.
No, I think,
And so I
think
mean,
that's awesome.
it's we can do better at that, and we have to.
So, you know, one of the problems that from an outsider's point of view, that I struggle with watching school districts is they seem to always cater to the lowest common denominator versus the gifted and talented. And when I say gifted and talented, I'm not throwing rocks at the other ones, but you know, a lot of times it feels like the ones that are excelling or trying, that they're held back because, well, you don't need to get out too far ahead of everybody. We need to keep you back.
I disagree with that.
Disagree?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, you know, why not? Why stymie them? Let them learn. You know, there's an element, and I'll be frank with you, even when my son was advanced, there was a maturity element that has to be there because he had some times he was on the computer. And someone oversaw that, but at the time of the age, he just wasn't really ready for
Oh,
it.
no, I'm still growing up. I know completely what you mean on that, and that makes total sense. Yes, sir. What is your thoughts on teacher pay? That's something that the public hears about all the time, is teachers are underpaid, all of that. What is your thoughts on that?
Well, I appreciate you asking. It's almost like something I should have told you to do, but I absolutely know we're not competitive.
And when you say competitive, who are competitive with who?
Great. So great question. So I'll share with you, there was 2 years ago when the state was telling us that we should increase teachers and they're going to give us some extra money to increase teachers' pay. I wanted to know, were we doing enough? What could we do in addition to what the state was being able to give us for that? And I did quite a bit of homework with not only the surrounding areas, but similar areas that we looked at from a standpoint of task force comparison, so that at least I was comparing to what the superintendent and administration was doing. And I quickly found that we were not competitive in our salary structure and benefits. We have made great strides in that. Benefits we've increased for health care and some of the insurances, not where we need to be, but let me say this, if I wanted to go here, we've come a little bit more than halfway, and I think we'll get there. For salaries is concerned, we're very competitive on the entry levels, but I don't think we're competitive on the veterans levels, if you will. And so that's where I want us to really look at the budget, find the money, find the non-tax revenues, be able to find ways that we can sustain that and be able to pay for it. I've voted against stipends. You know, people say, why did you vote against it? Should we get some kind of money? I said, absolutely, but I don't believe in the stipends. And here's why I don't believe in the stipends, because the stipend is a fixed amount. When that fixed amount is applied at the lower end of this pay scale, it's a higher increase. Then when you're comparing it to the higher pay scale, it's a lower increase. And so to me, there's some inequities in that, and I think we need to do better at it. I'll go one step further. We had a survey completed that gave us the information that I already did on my own homework, but I asked the guy that presented it to us, and I said, did you do anything outside of the area or similar sized schools? He says, what do you mean? I said, did you do by districts that are distinguished, districts that are top performers? Because I want to know, are we paying in comparison to that? Because logically, if you get better quality teachers, you should be paying for that. And that's where I believe that we should do a better job.
One of the reasons that I've heard that teachers pay is a difficult issue, and I don't know if this is true or not. I've heard that the part of the problem is the teachers unions, in the sense that, you know, teachers are paid on time or on their time and service, for lack of better terms, time on the job versus, say, merit. And that a teacher that's been there 10 years, that is amazing, that is just, you know, setting new levels of excellence, gets paid the same as the teacher that's been there 10 years that phones it in all the time. And what I've been told is one of the problems of keeping and retaining the long-term teachers is there's no incentive for them based on their merit or their excelling, or whether they put in all the extra work, they get the same as the person next to them that's not. I guess, A, is that true? And if it is, how do you fix that? Or how do you address that? And, you know, because that, I'm all for equal opportunity, but I despise the equal outcome. Like, I think that's impossible to attain. And I think that's me personally, I think it's absolutely ridiculous, because you have those overachievers. You have the people that will stay there late and put in the hours. And then you have the ones that are going to go home 10 minutes early. And if those two people are making the same, I wouldn't want to stay in that career field, you know? And so was what I was told true? And if so, how do we fix that?
So I don't know about the truth, but I'll say this much. First of all, I'm a business person,
Yes,
and I've paid out incentives and bonuses and that like. But when I look at teachers, and a lot of people tell me business is different than education, and in some ways the organizational structure, I disagree with that. But in other ways, they're correct, and for this is one reason. When you're educating a child, it's a lot of people making that mark on that child's lives and doing so. Maybe that child is struggling this year, and that teacher did well, but that teacher probably had some help from previous years, and then does that child continue to go? So what I'm getting at is it takes more than just one teacher, and so that's what's hard. Having said that, there is the state having a look at incentive pay. They started that in 2012 up in Longview, and for the most part, people have been pretty satisfied with it. I know that we are going to be looking at that. I want to be talking about that tomorrow night. And that's one of the learnings that we just took away from our trainings that we do annually, talking about teacher incentives and how did that go. I also have to say that I like to see more school incentives because it is a team effort. And I think then somebody's opinion may be that teacher shouldn't have that incentive because they didn't earn it or what have you. And so I think at least in the transition, if we're going to do any type of incentives, we need to look at a team approach.
I like it. Good. Okay. On the note, wrapping up on the teacher stuff, where do you think teacher morale is right now? Do you think it's high? Do you think it's low?
I can tell you it's low. And I can tell you I mean, put yourself in their position. They have to do almost two separate types of teaching. They've got to teach remotely, make sure that the people are staying attention on that computer with them, and they have to teach in the classroom. And so to be able to have full attention, it's diverted because you're always checking to see if these questions and following up with homework. There was a time that we didn't have enough computers, we didn't have enough hotspots. I mean, we didn't have enough PPE, and I know we're still working on a lot of these issues. We didn't have connections for some of the teachers that didn't have internet at home.
Well, and that was one of my next questions was the impact of COVID, and I can see that because I mean, just in the setup we have to get going here, we were a few minutes late getting started because there's so much, and I'm not the most techie guy. That's why I'm sitting here talking instead of over there, like Steve doing all the good stuff. But you know, I can imagine if you become a teacher to go into the classroom to teach, and then all of a sudden, what you're having to like try to teach a class on a class, you know. I would imagine it's hard enough teaching or keeping kids' attention in the classroom, much less on a computer when they can, you know, whatever. And so
my hats are off to the teachers. They've done a phenomenal job of making adjustments, and really some of the stories we've heard on the board about some of the adjustments that they've made has been brilliant. And that's what makes me proud. I'm very excited.
That ingenuity of you know, what is the saying that is something is the force of all, or I can't even think of it, but necessity is the force of all creations or something, you know. And
so when Ford and some of the other companies stopped making cars, they started making respirators back in March and April. I just was proud. I mean, I know what it takes from a manufacturing to shut down the line, to change it out and make sure that you can have it, quality still going there. That's what our teachers did.
It's outstanding, and I would agree with that. And you know, and I'll be the first to admit I give the school board a hard time on taxes and all this, but I have been just extremely humbled and marveled at exactly what you speak of how the teachers, you know, man, they put on their headbands and just went to war. I mean, this was not easy, and I haven't met one that doesn't feel like they've been in, like, this season, this school year's already been like 10 years long, because they're just, but in that same breath, their passion is still there for the students.
Yes, absolutely.
They're going to figure it out. They're going to find a way to do it. And you're right. That is pretty cool.
Do you have any recollection of a teacher that really impacted your life?
Absolutely. Coach Hilliard, Miss Hoffman.
Boom.
I can, Mr. Ramus. I can name them right now. I had different ones that gave me a nugget of belief in myself, or, you know, they just believed in me or made me feel they did. And to this day, you know, because I struggled to about 8th grade or so with some bullying and stuff like that. And yes, there was absolutely just the compassion that was showed by some of the teachers and Coach Hilliard that pulled me aside after just a terrible race and gave me this little, you know, pick me up speech that all these years later I remember, because it was right, just what I needed.
At the time, it's what you needed.
Yes, sir. And we spend more time with those teachers and a lot of times than we do our family, our friends, or anybody else. And so they do have a cherished spot. And Yeah, absolutely. I'm sitting here today because of some of the teachers and coaches in my life, and there's no mistake about that. Moving on, because we're running on time. Wow. This thing is going fast. One of the things that I was personally, now that we're past it, one of the deals that I was personally bothered by, and I know a lot in the community was the tax that VISD did after Harvey. When they come in and they hit that, I felt
about the bond.
Yes, sir. That after the bond failed, and then they came back in and they passed that 12-cent tax or whatever, the emergency tax after Harvey. I thought that was atrocious. I cannot be stronger terms on how bad I thought that of an idea that was, when the community was just on their rear ends. And it left a very sour taste in my mouth, because I didn't think it was the time to hit the community with the tax. And then the excuse given to us was, well, we don't have our FEMA money. Then you got your FEMA money, and it was like, okay, well, we're getting our, that hadn't gone through yet. That could have been stopped. But no, we'll be good stewards with your money. Well, no, you double dip. And what you told us you needed it for, and I say you, I don't mean you specifically, but I felt betrayed on that, and I know a lot of people did in the community, because, on the school bond, it's 60-40, whatever, 40% supported, 60 didn't, roughly, whatever. But on that tax, I didn't find one person in the community that was for that. The school board was, but nobody else in this entire town was. I mean, I didn't see one person stand up for it, and that room was packed when everybody went up there to the public meeting or whatever. And I guess where I was disappointed is, like I said, I didn't see one vote, not one vote from the community for this, nobody. And a packed room of everybody opposed to it, lots of different ideas given, but it felt like the fix was in. A lot of the times it feels like once an idea is proposed to us as the public, that the decision's already been made, that these are the hoops that you guys have to jump through to say that because you have to jump through them, and what we say as the public doesn't matter. And it's hard to not believe that when things like that Harvey tax and that emergency tax happen, because I thought that was one of the most disgusting things that I've seen. And so how do you restore well, first I'd like to know what your thoughts on that Harvey tax were, on that emergency tax, and then how do you regain the trust with the public that just absolutely felt betrayed by that?
So I voted against it.
Yes, sir. I know you did.
For the record, but once the board passed it, then we have to be as a board and move on.
United. I understand. Yes, sir.
And as far as the trust, I mean, I ran on that platform, and I feel like that we definitely need to build the trust, because when the bond didn't pass, that was a display of non-trust, or at least not seeing it, that the bond was going to be an investment. We're going through the task force now, and there's some sensitivity. I praise the task force, because they're looking at the COVID situation, the toughest people losing jobs, etc. Is this not the right time? There's no doubt in my mind that there's some buildings that definitely need to be repaired.
Yes, sir.
But how much do we do on the bond? That's the key for me. What's the task force recommendation going to be? And please, by all means, any of you in the public, if you want to go talk to the task force members and share your information so you don't have to go to a meeting, please do so. And their names should be public on the website. Call me, and I can give you some names if you need to. But your public needs to express their concerns. Absolutely.
Good deal. And mentioning that bond, what is the future? I understand that whether we like it or not, that's part of the way you guys have to do things. Yep. And I agree with you. A lot of the frustration, we understand that there's buildings that need to be fixed. We understand, and the analogy I used last time that I just beat to death was, you guys are driving a Suburban that's broken down and it needs a lot of work. I get it. But I felt like instead of saying, hey, we need our Suburban fixed, or can we upgrade to an Escalade and whatever, I felt like we just jumped out to a Ferrari. Yeah. And that was what, so many of those things felt unjustified. And if we were way out in the black and everybody, money was overflowing, and well, okay, let's talk about those things. But a lot of people wouldn't get some of those luxury items in their own homes, in their own lives, yet they're expected to pay for them. And I guess my
point's taken. I mean, your point's well taken, that if you weren't comfortable with what we did, and I can assure you, if I'm still on the board, that I'll be looking at those things and making sure that we're not overdoing, that we're doing what we need to get done. I mean, as you're correct, if you got a 50-year-old house, there's going to be some repairs that you're going to have to keep up. Your roof alone every 20 years. So,
yes, sir.
So, absolutely.
And I can't speak for the public, but I can speak for myself, and I understand what you guys need, and I really feel like if if that bond is put forward, because everybody else is operating off of bare bones right now for the most part, and if that bare bones, this is our minimum, this is what we need, I think you'll get it. You know, I really do. But if it just feels like it's, you know, extra 3 or 4 ice cream scoops on top of it, you're not gonna, you know, because guys like me will fight that, you know. And wrapping up here, I had one last question that one of the deals during the bond that I heard a lot of was athletic equality, in the sense of, you know, the girls' soccer team should have the same facilities and setup as the boys' football team and all of that. Well, I understand on paper how that sounds good and that whatever, but I haven't seen a female soccer team fill the stands like the Friday night football games will. And to me, it's kind of like a fair market value type or a free market type of deal that, you know, the NBA, for example, they fill stadiums. Well, I don't think the WNBA players should be paid the same as the NBA because they don't fill the stadiums. And that's not a knock against the women's soccer team or anything like that. But it was that whole, why are we expected to pay for the sake of fairness, you know, for everybody to have, if those facilities and teams aren't producing, you know, I would be willing to look at a new stadium and all this if we'd won state 10 years in a row and all these things. But, you know, I feel like we put the cart before the horse and we want the luxuries, but we haven't earned them, for lack of better terms, you know?
So we have a lot of facilities that are not being utilized, and that's one question that I've asked a lot is, what are we going to do? Again, what's the vision? If the vision is this, how do those buildings or properties that are not being utilized, the fields that are not being utilized, let's figure out what to do with them. And that, to me, is the vision has to come. My kids are in athletics, and one of the things I despise, and I know we need monies to help the programs, but it's just hard for kids to have to go and door to door sometimes and fundraise. I just, to me, that's the job of the school district, is to provide whatever the needs are. And if we can't do that, then to me, we're not doing the job that we should be doing. And
Gotcha.
so, to me, let's work on those fields. Let's do what we can to make it the best we can for the students.
Gotcha. Well, my questions are done.
Really?
And I've even already asked you one of the ones from the public earlier, and so I only have 2 left for you.
All right.
One, and these are public. These are from the public. What separates you from your opponent?
I think organization skills. I'm very action-oriented. If I get after something, if I identify it, I'm going after it, and I want to do the best I can to get that result. That's the way I've just always operated.
Yes, sir. Fair enough. How does your Christian faith affect your policy decisions and how you vote?
Totally. I mean, that's exactly, because I am a Christian.
Yes, sir.
So I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, no, that works for me. On that note, guys, that was our interview here, and thank you so much for your time. And again, I want to tell you, Mr. Baldwin, that you know, I admire the fact that you actually walk into the arena. And you know, I like to sit out here and do my interviews and give my opinions on stuff, but I don't have any desire to go run for school board or any of these offices in it. And I'm thankful for you and for people like you, whether I even agree with their policies or not. I do appreciate the fact that they're willing to put their necks out there and go do that. And running for public office sucks. And it, you know, you have to do a lot of stuff you don't want to. But in the same breath, I will say this: I have marveled and been very blown away by watching you since you took off. It's not an endorsement, it's not anything else, but it's a simple acknowledgement of the fact that you walk the walk. And I respect that. And you've earned the respect of, when we talked 2.5 years ago or 3, whenever that was, that first time, you laid out, this is the things that I want to do. These are the things that I want to try to accomplish. Some you did, some you didn't, but you were always there. You did what you said you were going to do, and I can respect that. Even if we have differences, even if we don't, you show up and you're in the arena. And I respect the man in the arena, and I, you know, again, for the other school board members, whether I agree with their policy or not, I respect them all being there, you know. And so thank you for I know this is time away from your family. You know.
And you too.
Yes, sir. But, you know,
I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. I'm blessed to be a part of this. And again, I wanted to put on you and all the people that do this that, you know, we gripe at you a lot. We throw rocks. We criticize everything you do. We second guess. We armchair quarterback. We do all this. But not very many of us ever go out there and actually walk the walk and go through and run for these offices. And so I wish you the best of
Thank
luck. I thank you for your role in the community. Win or lose, thank you.
You bet.
And
Pleasure to be here.
yes, sir. And so early voting is going on right now.
Right now.
District 3 they can vote, and then election day obviously they can vote. Anything I'm forgetting? Any last minute pieces?
I would
you
just
wanna get
say,
in?
let me give you the precincts. It's 15, 16, 18, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24 are in my district.
Outstanding, outstanding. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We have all new episodes of Meet Victoria coming up right after the election. Probably in December, we're rolling them. We'll pick a time to roll them out, but we've got exciting things coming. We've got a Meet Your District Attorney coming up with Constance Philly. She's done an amazing job. We're very blessed to have her. And so we've got all sorts of exciting things coming. But this one is a wrap, guys. And if you haven't voted, get out there and vote. Anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you at the next.